We are just over 1 week out from IPF Worlds 2025, and it is time for me to make my predictions on the podium and winners of every single weight class across both the men's and the women's side. I'm going to be splitting this up into two videos though, because I don't want it to be ridiculously long. So this one is going to be looking at the lighter weight classes, so from the 47s through to the 63s on the women's side, and 59s through to the 83s on the men's side. So starting with the 47s, so I'm going to go through each of the top nominations or the lifters I'm looking at who are in contention for the podium, and then I'm going to be predicting the order they're going to place in. So Tiffany Chapone obviously is our #1 nomination, 4-time defending world champion, heavy favorite going in with the 433 total. We've seen her training is looking pretty strong. She's hit a 455 training total back about a month and a half ago. So she is without a doubt the heavy favorite. But coming in second is the USA representative Heather Connor. 425 is what she did at PNATs to clinch this spot. Again, we've seen some pretty solid training, and of course she's got the huge deadlift, over 200 kilos, which is her biggest weapon. So I think Tiff is going to have to pace to probably try and beat the world record, which she actually doesn't hold anymore. It's held by Jess Espinal with 433.5. So I think Tiff is going to have to pace to try and reclaim her world record in order to be safe and not within striking range of Heather Connor's final deadlift. And third nomination, Australia's own Vicky Kijul-Naipon, 399, and she is a strong podium favorite, I would say. 399 nomination. She's looked pretty good. She hit a 411.5 training total just a few days ago. And she's only 9 kilos ahead of fourth nomination, Annalisa Mota. But I think these three are without a doubt the lifters that are in contention for the win and the strong podium favorites. I think Turbo Tiff, is going to win her 5th straight world title and reclaim her world record. That is my first prediction I'm making. It is far from a groundbreaking one, I know. And I do have some, slight underdog / upset picks in some of these, but for this one, I'm going to have to go with the favorite, and that is Tiff. I think she'll, exactly like I said, pace to reclaim her world record and put it out of reach of Heather Connor's deadlift. And my second prediction, again, I know this is a super safe and boring one, but I think the rest of the podium is just going to match the nominations. I think Heather Connor is probably too far ahead of Vicky for her to get that second spot, but I think she's pretty safe with the podium. And Heather, I think she may load up big for the final deadlift, depending on where Tiff ends up. But I think more likely than not, she's just gonna secure her second place. And there's your podium for the first weight class, the women's 47 kilo class. On to the men, 59 kilos. So I know technically Kassem Sand isn't the top nomination, but let's not kid ourselves here. He is the heavy favorite, technically only nominated with a 75 kilo token total, because he's never actually competed as a 59. But we all know he hit 715 at Sheffield as a 66. He's a defending world champion from the 66s, which he won last year with 707.5. And in training, he is looking very strong. Just 2 weeks ago, he put up a 680 training total. That's right, 680, which is almost 10 kilos above Sergey Fedosienko's long-standing world record. More on that in a second. I actually did a video about Kassem Sand's training and how crazy it would be if he could beat that world record that's been held for such a long time. So I'll leave a link to that. Next up, technically nominated in first place, but in my own nomination second, Antoine Garcia with 610. Now again, in training, he's looked pretty strong, so he's kind of coming off a disappointing Euros performance where he finished in, I believe it was third, behind fellow Frenchman Brian Sion and Ivan Campagna Diaz, who we'll look at next. But he's looked good in training recently. 230.5 squat, 140.5 bench we've seen. Haven't seen much of his deadlift, but I mean, former world champion, former European champion, 610 with his nomination. He is without a doubt a strong podium threat, and depending on where Kassem Sand is on the day, you never know. He's never been a 59 kilo lifter before. He could be way down. Antoine could be there if he has a phenomenal day to maybe push him a bit. And nominated third, just 2.5 kilos behind that, is the reigning European champion Ivan Campagno Diaz, 607.5. And his training has also looked real good. In fact, he's been well into the 600s in training. He hit a 628 training total just 2 or 3 weeks ago. And granted, he, I think, walks around a bit heavy, just like most of the lower weight classes do, especially the 59s. So it's not uncommon for him to be, weighing in the low 60s. But still, 628 is looking like a very strong total. And again, he's comfortably in the 600s. Now, there are some other lifters here who could be podium threats. So you have Keiko Naraku, and also Japanese lifter Kiyosoku Yoshioka, and Brian Song, who I mentioned, who actually beat Antoine Garcia at Euros. They're all, in the high 500s, 590s. However, I think these three are very much the standout podium favorites. I think these three are all comfortably above 600, and I don't think any of the other nominated lifters will be above 600, or not far above anyway. But my prediction is Kassem Sand is, not only will he win, because that's a very safe prediction, I'm predicting he is going to break the squat, the deadlift, and the total world records on his way to the title. So similar to, the video that I did about him where I spoke about his chances of taking the title, he's well and truly capable and he's got the strength for it, right? Apparently his body weight was around 62, I think he said. Somewhere around there when he did that 680 training total. So that's within gut cut / water cut distance, not crazy far off. And there's talks about, is he going to break the world record? Because obviously he's got Sheffield, which that's, he doesn't want to up his or eat into his Sheffield advantage too much. But the world record being 669.5 by Fedosienko, I think he's going to do it. I think he's going to chip it to 670, which means in order to do that, because his bench is about 20 plus kilos behind Fedo's, he's going to have to take the squat and deadlift world record. Squat world record is 240 and deadlift world record is 275.5. I reckon he's got both, squat by quite a few kilos probably, and deadlift he'll at least chip it. And with roughly a 150-ish bench, that'll be enough, I think, for him to total 670 and take squat, deadlift, and total world records on his way to his second successive world title in a second weight class. This would be quite an impressive win by Kassem Sand. And fourth prediction for the podium in the 59s, I think Ivan and Antoine are going to round out the podium in that order. I think Ivan finishes second. I think Antoine makes it up to third. And there's my 59 kilo predictions for podium. All right, on to the 52s. Now we're going to have a bit more, or slightly more contenders in this class than the previous two. So number one nomination, obviously Evie Corrigan, two-time defending champion, former Sheffield champ, 477.5. Her New Zealand compatriot Megan Lee Smith is a strong second nomination at 466. Both of them have looked, well, actually we haven't seen too much of Megan Lee Smith's training, or I haven't anyway. Evie is looking pretty strong. I think she did 467.5 total just a few days ago in training. And like I said, I haven't seen too much of what Megan Lee Smith is doing. But over 20 kilos behind in third nomination is Catherine Gagne from Canada, who again I haven't seen all that much of in training. I don't think she posted a whole lot of her training, so we don't really know exactly where she's at. Ploon Deckers is the reigning European champion at 443, and she is in great form. She won Euros, beating Naomi Alibert, who I'll look at next, and I think she is going to take her squat world record at least, chip that, and continue building her squat dominance in this weight class. And in fifth nomination is Naomi Alibert, who's 437.5, and she did lose to Ploon Deckers at Euros just recently. However, she has totaled more than this before. In fact, she's totaled 454 before as her best ever numbers at 52. So 437.5, I know she's nominated fifth, but her all-time best numbers, she makes a very strong podium threat there. And she has been looking better in training. We have seen a 200 kilo deadlift from her a couple weeks ago. which is, I think, 15 kilos above what she hit at Euros. So that already puts her right back up to PB territory. So my prediction for the 52s is that New Zealand go 1 and 2, Evie wins, Megan Lee Smith takes second, and Evie does the three-peat. She becomes the 3-time world champion and wins her 3rd straight world title in the 52s, continues her era of dominance over the weight class, and New Zealand get a gold and a silver in that class. I think Megan Lee Smith is, too far ahead of the other podium contenders to lose out on that second place. And Noemi Alibert, from nominated in 5th position, I think she takes podium. She takes the bronze. Like I said, her best numbers, which it looks like she's pacing back towards based on her recent training deadlift. I think she is going to be stronger than the other nominations and beat out Catherine from Canada, as well as take revenge over Pluun Dekkers from Netherlands, who beat her at Euros just a few months ago. All right, on to the 66s, back into the men's side. And here we have our first nomination, who's Shell Backlund, 770. Obviously, his Sheffield world record that he did. Now, we saw him at Euros as a 74, do, I think it was 760 or thereabouts, looking not too easy in a weight class up. But I think it was open by the fact he wasn't in the best form and he just did what he needed to do to win on that day. Recently in training, just a few days ago, or about a week ago, he hit a 740 total at around 70 kilos body weight. So, I mean, that already is probably going to be enough to get the job done on the day. But I think he's going to be good for more than that as well. His deadlift is apparently feeling real good from what he said. So, yeah, is he going to push the world record? I don't know. Well, I'm going to make a prediction about it in a second, but with Sheffield around the corner, I don't think that's his priority. I think his priority is just doing what he needs to do to win, which him having the biggest deadlift in 66 kilo history is going to be a big advantage in that. Nominated second is Avery Jackson, the guy who pulled off the craziest upset at PA Nats, beating out Jonathan Garcia to take the 66 kilo crown and secure his ticket to Worlds. 720 is what did that, which is a huge total. That's actually the 3rd biggest 66 total ever, behind only Shell himself and Kyoto Uchiyama, who did 725, who's not going to be at Worlds this year. Pretty notable absences at Worlds in the 66 class. In fact, the podium last year that all tied on total, none of them are there. So Panna isn't there because he's lifting at World Games. Jonathan Garcia lost out to Avery Jackson, so he's not there. And Kasim Sanders dropped down to 59s. Kyoto Ishiyama isn't there either because he's also focusing on World Games. But Avery Jackson doesn't really post much of his training, so not exactly sure where he's at. But if he can replicate that 720, he's going to make sure that Shell has to show up in pretty damn good form in order to secure that win. Because Avery also has a pretty big deadlift on him. Not as big as Shell, granted, but hell, you never know. I mean, he made quite a significant amount of gains for his last competition. You never know. Nominating third is Santos Jimenez, who is nominated with 688, the Mexican lifter. He's looked pretty good in training. So about 2 weeks ago, he did a 658 total. However, that consisted of a bench triple and a deadlift set of 4. So he's definitely pacing to be around his best numbers, if not more so, I would say, based on those sets. And fourth nomination is the Japanese lifter Yusuke Satake, who's just a few kilos off that with 685.5, who we haven't seen too much training of recently as well. He's an equipped lifter as well, so he's done equipped competitions not relatively recently. So we've seen a lot of that, but not too much of his raw training, although he seems to be a pretty consistent lifter who makes a lot of his attempts. And the rest of the nominations are over 20 kilos behind, so I think these are without a doubt the main 4 that are going to be in podium contention. And there's a pretty big gap between them, at least first, second, and then second and third. The battle for podium will be interesting, but I think Shell is going to do what it needs to do to win. And that's my pretty safe prediction on this one. Shell I don't think he's going to break world records on any lift, really. He's spoken he might try and break the deadlift world record. I don't think he's going to need to. And I think that he's going to just lock up the win. And he still wants to retain as much of that Sheffield advantage as he can. We know that he's capable of 800 at 66, or at least I think pretty much everyone can agree that on his perfect day he could do 800 at 66, which, based on the fact his world record's now 770, I don't think he's going to want to push to raise that anymore, because he wants as much advantage at Sheffield as possible. I think he's going to clinch his world title, which is going to be the biggest gap between world titles, because last time Shell won Worlds, Classic Worlds, was in 2017, 8 years ago, when he beat some guy by the name of Taylor Atwood in the 74s. So a gap of 8 years between Worlds wins is wild. So it's going to be a great story from Shell there. And to round out the podium, I think Avery takes a pretty easy second place, and Jimenez gets on the podium and takes bronze. I think there's going to be a pretty decent sized gap between Shell and Avery. I don't think Avery is going to be able to pull off the upset like he did at PA Nats. I think Shell is just going to be too far ahead of him. Not to mention he's far more experienced internationally than Avery is. It's not even close. However, I also think it's going to be a decent sized gap between Avery Jackson and the podium contenders being Jimenez and Satake. So I think Avery can secure a silver medal at his Worlds debut, which is obviously great. And I think Jimenez wins the battle for podium and gets bronze. He's only a few kilos ahead of Satake in nominations, but he's also got the bigger deadlift, and he's looked, in training anyway, recently from what I could see, looked better, although we haven't seen much of Satake's training. So here's my 66 predictions. I know I haven't gotten into anything crazy yet, but I think these lower weight classes, in my opinion, are pretty straightforward to predict. Unless you're predicting a crazy upset, it's hard to go against the nominations in these, I find. On to the 57s. So we have Jad Jacob, who's nominated first with 5:15. Now, the story with her is, very unfortunately, her coach passed away, and that seemed to impact, as you would expect, a lot of her training and strength going to Sheffield, where she only totaled 457.5. We haven't seen too much of her training since then. I assume she's in a better place and her training has picked back up. I'm not exactly sure what numbers to expect from her though, and that's going to make this class a bit more difficult to predict. Second nomination with the same total is Sarah Naldi, the Italian former 63 lifter, who cut down to the 57s, and 5:15 is her nominated total. Her best ever numbers though as a 63 was 5:37.5. So she's taken a lot of her 63 kilo strength down, and I think she could be good for over 5:15. The question is, who else could be good for over 5:15 in this class? And her training is looking pretty strong. She squatted 195 for a triple on squats, which is crazy as a 57, just a few weeks ago. So she's a very strong contender for the title. And third nomination is Joy Namani, 4-time world champion across 2 weight classes, absolute legend of the game. 506 is her nominated total. Her best ever total is 511.5, which she did as a light 63, weighing just over 60 kilos. So it's not inconceivable to think that she could be close to that 5:15 mark as well, especially with her huge final deadlift that she's going to have. Now, fourth and fifth nominations, you have Bobby Butters with 492.5 and Pal Sovanfactor, I think, with 490. Apologies for the pronunciation there. But the next lift I want to highlight is someone who's actually nominated in 6th position, and that's Natalie Richards, who's nominated with 482.5. However, her best ever total is 516.5. In fact, she's one of the best 57 lifters ever. She's a 2023 world champion, and unfortunately, she's been injured recently, which is why her total is over 30 kilos below what her best ever numbers are as a 57. And not only did she win Worlds in 2023, she was also best lifter at Worlds 2023. So she's absolutely championship caliber, and 482.5 is what she did at PA Nats, which was all she needed to win and secure her spot. So she wasn't pushing any further than she needed, not trying to re-aggravate her injury. But I do think that she, you can't sleep, even though she's nominated in 6th, you can't sleep on Natalie Richards. My prediction though is Sarah Naldi continues the winning hero cut trend and wins the 57s. Now, what I mean by the winning hero cut trend is if you look at every single weight class that I've talked about so far, the lower weight classes across both the men's and the women's side, every single champion, or who I'm predicting to be champion, actually started off in the weight class above and cut down. So in the men's, obviously you have Kasim Sand, who is just now cutting to the 59s for the first time, and Shell, who cut to 66 from 74s. On the women's side, you have, well, not in the 47s, because Tiff has been a lifetime 47, but in the 52s, Evie Corrigan was a 57 lifter, and she actually pioneered this sort of hero cut trend for the inaugural Sheffield in 2023, where she cut down to 52s to win the first Sheffield. And then she stayed there ever since and racked up 2 world titles and possibly a third next week. So in the 57s, I think we're going to see another example of this, a lifter who cut down from a higher weight class and retain a lot of their strength. And this time I think that's going to be Sarah Naldi, and she's going to win Worlds this year as a 57, I believe. 10th prediction is Jade and Natalie make the podium. Now, the order of this was hard for me to decide because both of them, I think, are probably going to come in below their best. They both hit 515 and 516.5 respectively. I don't think they're going to be at that level. Jade, for the reasons I mentioned before, and Natalie Richards, I know she's looked better in training post PNATs, but I'm not sure if she's looking good enough to be able to take the title away from Sarah Naldi, who's coming in looking very, very strong. So yeah, I kept it at Jade and Natalie in that order. However, that was pretty much a coin flip, and that could go either way. But there's my podium prediction for the 57s. Onto the 74s on the men's side. Top nomination by a landslide, Austin Perkins 843. No one's touching that. Chunchia Fan in second with 780. About a month ago, we saw a 785 training total, and I believe he's totaled 800.5 in the gym as well, although that was a few months ago, or last year even. Clinton Lee from Singapore nominated third with 758. And in fourth nomination is 755 Joshua Wright from Germany, going to be lifting in his home country, which is going to be, you would think, an advantage for him. He's coming off a Euros silver medal where he lost out to Shell, who was a 74 just a few months ago at Euros, but he's also looking in very good shape. Now, no surprises here. Perk is going to win and retain his title. He's going to dominate. However, I don't think he's going to set any world records on either lift or total, and most notably, I don't think he's going to walk away with best lifter like he did last year. Last year, he won Best Lifter by quite a bit, where he beat Shell to win 74 kilo worlds. And he upped the world record by quite a bit last year because he was lifting against Shell, who was only 20 or so kilos behind him, 20, 25 kilos behind him, and also had the benefit of having a bigger deadlift than Perk. This year, he's going to have no such problem. He's 60 plus kilos ahead on nominations, and there's not going to be a huge deadlifter who could potentially load up to catch him. So he's very much going to be lifting against himself. And with Sheffield on the horizon, and I know Perk had by his lofty standards, a disappointing Sheffield, even though he still had the highest coefficient out of anyone there, only totaling 843. I think he's going to want to put himself in the best possible position to have an insane performance in next year's Sheffield, and it's not in his interest to push the world record. Same thing with on the individual lifts with squat and, both his other lifts as well, especially squat. I don't think there's any point in him going for a world record there, unless he, I guess, wants to put on a show and chip it just because he can. But I predict he's going to cruise to a relatively comfortable win. I think he's probably still going to push to, maybe 820, maybe 830, just to sort of send a message that he's still very much there, and he's still, staking his claim as the pound for pound king. Hell, I could even see him going 840 for that reason. But I don't think that will be good enough to win Best Lifter this year. And that is more to do with the fact that the lifter I think who's going to win Best Lifter is going to have to push based on his opposition, whereas Perk is not. And prediction number 12, Chun Chia-fan extends his bench press world record and takes an easy second. So speaking of world records, Perk won't take any, but Chun Chia-fan will. He's the bench press world record holder with 215 that he did at Asian Championships at the end of last year. And he's done, I believe, 222.5 in training just a couple weeks ago. So he's looking pretty damn strong. And he's going to take a pretty comfortable second place, sort of similar to the 66ers. Big gap between 1 and 2, and also pretty big gap between 2 and 3. So Chun Chia-fan, silver medal, and a new bench world record. And third place, winning the fight for podium in his home country, is Joshua Wright. Joshua Wright wins the battle for podium against Clinton Lee. There are also some other lifters worth mentioning. The Australian pair, Leo Sukitra, who's 748, and Kian Babai Somagi, who's 742. So they're also not that far off podium contention either. So it'd be cool to see one of them get on podium. I do think it's going to come down to between Clinton and Josh Wright, though, like I had on the previous slide. And I do think it's going to be Josh Wright who walks away with it. Not just because he's lifting his home country, although that is an advantage, but he's looked very strong in, well, we haven't seen too much training, but at Euros he looked really strong. He went 9 for 9. His lifts looked relatively comfortable. Looked like he had more there on probably all of them, and set a total PB. I think 755. Well, you know, might not be enough for podium based on where Clinton lands on, but I think Josh Wright has potential to PB on his lifts again and go probably in the 760s, which I think will be enough to get him third place. And on to our final women's weight class for this video, 63s. So here again, there's a few more contenders to look at. So you have Meg Scanlon. Actually, sorry, no, there isn't. There's only 3. Meg Scanlon, who's 566, nominated first. Alba Bostrom, 554. And Chiara Bernardi, who's 540. Now, Meg Scanlon had that crazy 566 performance at Pierre Nats this year, which was a huge total, I believe over 600 dots, absolutely wild performance, which she didn't need to do because, I mean, she didn't even need to lift that Pierre Nats at all because she already had her Sheffield numbers. Not only did she go there and lift, she also went there and dropped the hammer and put a huge total of 566, and mad respect for that. Alba Bostrom as well, obviously super strong, 554, just came out of the juniors. And Chiara Bernardi, 540. Chiara has been leveling up though. In fact, just a couple weeks ago, about 6 weeks ago, she totaled 560 at a body weight of 64.5. So she was slightly out of the weight class, but 560 puts her right up there neck and neck with Meg Scanlon's crazy PNS performance. She's also put up even crazier numbers in the gym recently, where she totaled 557.5, consisting of a squat triple and a deadlift double. So she is coming in a lot stronger than that 540 nomination. And these 3 are very clearly the podium threats. Every other lifter is about 30 kilos behind on nominations. My prediction here is Chiara Bernardi pulls off the upset and gives Italy another world champion. Obviously, Carola Gara is a world champion, I think 3-time world champion now from Italy. But apart from that, no other Italian has won a world title. Well, I think we're going to see not 1, but 2 in the lighter women's weight classes. Sarah Rinaldi in the 57s and Chiara Bernardi in the 63s. Are they upset picks? I don't know, based on how strong Sarah Rinaldi is looking and the uncertainty around Jad Jacob and Natalie Richards, she might be the favorite there. And Chiara Bernardi, based on how strong she's been in the gym, you could argue well, I wouldn't say she's the favorite. I think Meg Scanlon's crazy 566, without a doubt, makes her the favorite in the 63s. But I'm picking Chiara Bernardi for the upset here to give Italy another gold medal. And 15th prediction, Meg Scanlon and Alba Bostrom round out the podium. No surprises. Like I said, they were 30 kilos up on nominations out of everyone else. Meg Scanlon, I think, will take second. I think it's going to be a very tight battle between her and Chiara, which probably will come down to the last deadlift. I reckon this is going to be an absolute insane battle. Alba Borstrom as well is going to be there too. I think there's going to be a bigger gap between her and Meg Scanlon though than between Meg and Kiara. I think those two are going to go neck and neck. And ultimately, I think Kiara has the bigger deadlift, and that's going to be the advantage. She's going to pull for the win, and I think she's going to get it, despite Meg Scanlon coming in the best shape of her life. But there's my podium prediction for the 63s. Okay, on to the 83 kilo men's class. Now, this is one of the biggest ones. This could be the most hyped up weight class on the men's side. Up till now on the men's side, every weight class I've looked at so far, there's been a clear heavy favorite. Kasim Sand, Shell, and Perk. It would take a brave man to bet against those three to win. And I'm not that man. But in the 83s, it's a lot closer. So you obviously have Joe Borenstein nominated first with 900 kilos. Legendary number that he did at PNAS this year to beat an absolutely murderer's row of American 83 lifters, but he's got a murderer's row of international 83 lifters to contend with now. But we have seen an 870 training total from him recently, just a few weeks ago, consisting of a squat double and a deadlift double as well. 870.5 is the IPF world record held by Russell Orhe. I don't think that record is going to stand after this 83 kilo flight does its thing. Nominated second is Ade Omisaken, who's 861. Now, what I will say is this looks like a 40 kilo gap, which would lend to believe that Joey B is a huge favorite. Make no mistake about it, Joey B is the favorite. However, I think we all know Ade is well beyond 861. In training, he hit 857.5, consisting of a squat double and a deadlift triple. So again, comparing that to Joey B's training total, not a crazy difference. Plus, he had an extra rep on his deadlift. So Ade is looking very strong. Plus, we saw he has a potential world record deadlift capability based on how he pulled 380.5 at Sheffield. So the fact that he could be pulling after Joey B makes him a very dangerous threat for that title. Nominated third is the defending champion also from the UK, Durans Kangamu. No one can forget what he did last year. No one was thinking he was going to win. He came out and pulled off, in my opinion, the greatest powerlifting upset of all time. If he were to do that again against his countryman Ade and more notably Joe Borenstein, who was the first lifter to hit 900, then that would be crazy. Back-to-back insane upsets over American favorites is wild. But you never know, you can't count out Durans. He's not one to post a lot of his top-end training like Joe B and Ade do, unfortunately. But he did show us a 182.5 kilo bench for a set of 4 just a few days ago, which is notable because his best competition bench is only 5 kilos above that. So he took a minus 5 kilo comp max bench and did it for a set of 4. Surely you would think his top end strength is higher than that. Plus the talk going into Sheffield was his train was going very well, and his 852.5 that he did at Sheffield was a disappointing performance for him. So I think he's good for beyond that. Can he pull it off again for a second straight year? You never know. And nominated fourth is Tim Monagatti with 845.5. Now Tim did this last year, and he was supposed to lift at Sheffield, but he had to pull out due to injury. I believe it was a lower body injury because he mentioned his bench was still looking pretty good. So we haven't seen too much of him. He has been training, and he looks like he is getting back to top form. We did see a 300 kilo squat from him about 3 weeks ago. Haven't seen much of his deadlift or anything else since then. So where he's at is pretty hard to tell. Is he back at his top level strength? Because that meet where he did 845.5, it looked like he had more in the tank. So I was actually very excited to see him go against Ade, Durans, and Ross at Sheffield. Unfortunately, he had to pull out due to injury. I think Ade actually took his spot though, so it wouldn't have been him against Ade. But regardless, Tim Monagatti is definitely in there, and he's getting slept on because he's pulled out of Sheffield and he hasn't been posting much of his training. You can't sleep on Tim Monagatti. Another lifter you can't sleep on is Enohoro Asin, who I know is nominated with 807.5, but he's way above that because of his huge deadlift and the fact he always pulls for the win. I did a whole, in fact, the last video I did was an entire video dedicated to Enahoro and his deadlifting strategy. So check that out. I'll leave a link to that in the description as well. But I basically go through his entire deadlift history and make a case for why he is a strong contender for the win this year, based on how strong he's looking, and he will load for the win. In fact, we've seen an 855 training total from him. That was about 2.5 months ago. And I think he's hit some slightly bigger numbers on individual lifts since then. So he is without a doubt a threat for not just the podium, but also the win. And another lifter who's a threat, nominated in 6th place, is the return of former world champion Carl Johansson from Sweden. He's a 2023 world champion in the 74s in that legendary year where he beat Taylor Atwood and Tim Monagatti head to head. Since then, he's had some injury issues, I believe, and he's bulked up to the 83 kilo class where he now resides. And he's nominated with an 805 total, which is his best total that he's hit to date as an 83. However, I don't think he was pushing all that hard at that meet. And I do think he is well beyond capable of more than that. Not super sure with his training, but we have seen a squat PB 287.5 just a few days ago. I believe I've seen a 200 bench not that long ago as well, which is around his best. And I don't think he's been deadlifting top end, or he hasn't been showing us top end deadlifts anyway. But I mean, he did pull a world record deadlift in the 74s 2 years ago to win, and that was 326, I believe, at the time. So you would have to think his deadlift is more than that now. Now 805, any other year he would be almost a lock for podium. This year though, it's going to take beyond low 800s. In fact, it's going to take beyond even mid 800s to hit podium this year. That's how much the worldwide 83s have leveled up. Also, there are some other lifters who are nominated with 797.5, just shy of 800 kilos. So Paul Ramberville of France and Kafui Hotsonyame of Canada, nominated in 7th and 8th, just shy of 800 kilos. Like I said, any other year they'll be worth mentioning as podium contenders. This year though, it's going to take, like I said, 850 plus, probably even more than that. Now my prediction is Joey B makes it official. He takes the IPF World Record, he wins the title, and he wins Best Lifter. Now what I mean by makes it official is he obviously is the overall world record holder with 900 kilos as an 83. He also held the overall world record last year when he hit 865 to beat Ross's 860. So on 2 separate occasions now, he's been unofficially the strongest 83 ever, but he's never taken the IPF world record because he's never had a chance to lift internationally, which is crazy given his caliber. He finally has that chance, and I believe he's going to take that chance and he's going to capitalize on it. He's going to make it official. He's going to officially become the world record holder and beat Ross's 870.5. He's going to win the title, win his world championship, and he's going to win Best Lifter. I think he's going to beat Perk for Best Lifter because he's going to have to push more than Perk will. Like I said, I do think Perk is going to go around probably that 830s mark, and doing the rough calculations for GL points, which is what the IPF uses, the only lifter I can see beating that, even in the upper weight classes, is Joe Borenstein, and it's going to take a high 800s to beat that. The thing is, I think we are going to see a high 800s from Joey B because of the threat of the other lifters, mainly Ade Omasakan. Joey B is going to have to put up damn near 900 kilos to guarantee the win because of how strong Ade is looking. Now, 17th prediction, I think Durans pulls into second on his last deadlift. I think Durans is going to pace himself similar to what he did at Sheffield this year, where he completed his 9 lifts, and on his final deadlift, he pulled just ahead of where Ade was. Then Ade came out for his final deadlift and took a huge jump to the world record, and like I said, came within a split second of getting it because he locked it out, then just dropped it at lockout. I think he's going to do a similar thing this time. He's going to pace himself to finish just ahead of where Ade is after his second deadlift, banking on the fact that Ade is going to miss and Joey B potentially is also going to miss. So Durans, I think, is going to, the wily veteran that he is, pace himself for second place, and he's going to get there. Ade, I think, is going to pace himself. He's going to be around 860, which means I'm predicting an 860 plus podium, which is crazy because it was just over a year ago where Russ first hit 860 at PA Nats last year, where everyone lost their minds because Russ has returned and there was no other 83 who was above 840 yet. Well, Delaney Wallace was just above 840, but no one else. But now I'm predicting a podium at Worlds of 860 plus. That's how far the 83s have come within just one short year. But yeah, I think Ade is going to be already 860 plus by his second deadlift. Durans is going to beat him on his last deadlift, like I said, so he's going to be 860 plus as well. And Ade, I think, is going to load up big on his final deadlift. He's going to be pulling after Joey B. Joey B is going to pull and get, in my opinion, probably high 800s, potentially even 900. And Ade is going to load up a huge world record deadlift attempt to beat Joey B. I don't think he's going to get it though. I think he's going to miss. I think it's going to be too much on the day. And I think Team USA and Joe Borenstein are going to force Ade to load more than what he can. Although that number is going to have to be more than 380.5. Because if Ade has to pull that again, I reckon he's got it. But speaking of pulling for the win, you all know what my last prediction is going to be if you watch my last video on Enna Horo. Enna is going to load not just a world record deadlift, but the biggest IPF deadlift we've ever seen, and he's going to break the floor with it. 411 kilos is the heaviest ever raw IPF deadlift done by Timur Samkaradze in the 120 pluses. Enna Horo at half his body weight is going to attempt over 411 for the win. He's going to go all in, and I don't think he's going to get it, but I think he's going to break the floor with it. I actually put a lot of thought into this and was actually close to predicting him to get this. In fact, if it wasn't for Joey B being so far ahead of the world record and being at 900 kilos, I probably would predict Enna to take the win. I think he's in very good form. I think there's a good chance he has a 400 plus kilo deadlift in him based on how his 390 looked. Again, more details in my last video on that. But yeah, Joey B is just too far ahead. And even though Enna's subtotal has improved, I think that Joey B and Ade are going to force him to pull over 411. It's probably going to have to be 415 to 420, which he's going to load regardless. It could be 1,000 pounds. Enna would still load it. But I just think it's going to be too much on the day. I think a 411 plus kilo deadlift is just too much for Enna Horo. Although he will still break the floor with it, which is going to be the crazy part. So for a split second, it's going to look like it's going to come up. That's my prediction. But there you go. Those are my 19 specific predictions for the World Championships coming up in just over a week's time. I'm going to drop my next video soon, which is going to be me predicting the heavier weight classes on both the women's and the men's side.